My name is Ted Geoghegan. I am the centerpiece director at this year's Hardline Film Festival, and I'm here to celebrate the German premiere of my new film, Brooklyn 45. And I am also hosting 2 repertory screenings of my older films, Mohawk and We Are Still Here. And I am very excited to be hanging out with you on the Viva la Movielución podcast.
I take a look at your reputation, and your roots are in German independent splatter movies.
Yeah.
I'm addicted to these movies.
Cool.
How you get connected to Andreas Schnaas or Markus Koch?
Yep. Yeah. So it's an interesting story. When I was very young, my parents would take me to the pawn shop. I don't know what the pawn shops in Germany. A pawn shop. You familiar with this?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I just want to make sure. I told this story in another country, and they were like, pawn shop? I was like, yeah, you like sell things and buy them back. And like, oh, okay. So when I was young, my parents would take me to pawn shops, and they would give me $20. And the deal at the pawn shop was $5 for a VHS tape or 5 tapes for $20. So I was like, I need the 5 for 20 deal. And I would go in and just walls of VHS tapes, and I was in heaven. And I would go through and I would take down like 50 tapes and pile them up. And then once I had the 50, I would go, okay, and I would narrow it down to 20 and then to 10 and then to the 5 that I would bring home. And I would do this like every 2 weeks. My parents, this was like my special treat every 2 weeks from my parents. And so when I was young, I built up an amazing VHS collection thanks to my parents' generosity. I think what it was they wanted to get rid of me for like 2 or 3 hours, and they would just leave me at the pawn shop and they would go do other things, and I would just sit there. Because it's the 80s and the 90s. You would leave your child at a pawn shop. Yeah. So I would pick out these movies, and it was a very special ritual for me. And one day I was in the pawn shop and I was looking through all the tapes, and I see the side of a VHS tape and it says violent shit on it.
Oh, yes.
And I go, oh, and I immediately start like shaking. I'm like, what is this? What is that? And I take the tape off the shelf and I look, and on the front there is this mask, like drawn. It's kind of like a bad drawing, but there's something about it's like very like creepy and punk rock and like bad. And I flip it over, and there's no photos on the back, just text. And the text is like, the most brutal, disgusting, fucked up movie ever made. And I was like scared to be holding this tape. And I was like, I do not know what this is, but I must bring it home. I must. So I put it aside and I picked out my other 4 tapes, and I brought them home. And I remember coming home, I still vividly remember this, coming home and taking out the tape and like shaking while I was putting it in the VCR, because I thought this movie was going to like fucking assault me. Like I thought it was going to like, and so I hit play and I like back up. Like I do not know what I'm going to see. And it's this fucking silly German splatter movie filmed on like consumer grade VHS in someone's backyard. And it is like guts made out of linguine and spaghetti. And I'm like, oh, okay. I said, okay, it is like a homemade horror movie. And I laughed, and I was like, okay, cool. And I put it back in the box and on the shelf. But I probably never watched it again on the tape. But it was always cool because people would come over to my house and they would look at my wall of horror VHS, and everyone would stop and go, what is violent shit? Because it's fucking crazy. It's a crazy title. And I would always say like, oh, it's this like homemade horror movie from Germany. And they're like, oh, should we watch it? And I was like, probably not. And they're like, okay, cool. And years went by. And now I am in college. I'm in university. And I decide that I'm going to write a book. Like, I have this great idea. I'm 20 years old or 19 years old. I'm going to write a book. And the book is going to be about horror directors you have never heard of. And so I'm like looking up all these directors. This is like almost before the internet, like the earliest internet. And I'm looking up all these directors and trying to find information on them. And I think to myself, I go, I wonder if I can find any information on the man who made Violent Shit. So I take out the videotape, again, the dusty videotape, and I put it in because it did not even say who made it on the box. And so I like fast forward to the end of the movie and I see like a film by Andreas Schnaas. And I'm like, okay, Andreas Schnaas. So I go on the internet and I guess I was about to say I Google, but it's before Google. Like I Yahoo'd, Ask Jeeves. But yeah, I like Yahoo'd Andreas Schnaas. And this is 1999 and he had a website. And I was like, whoa, okay, cool. And I was like, and it had like email Andreas here. And I was like, amazing. So I email him and I say, I'm writing a book on horror directors you have never heard of. I am a big fan of Violent Shit. And I would love to talk to you. And I pressed send and I thought, wow, it would be really cool if he wrote back one day and bing, and I look, and he has already written back. He wrote back in like 30 seconds. And he is like, yes. Oh my God, this is so cool. I have never been interviewed for a book. And I do not think he knows I am a 19-year-old child. But I go, cool, I would love to interview you. So we got on the telephone. And we did a long interview, and he told me about his childhood and growing up in Hamburg and his history with horror. And he grew up loving the Shaw Brothers, and he would sneak into the movies. And he told me all about, trying to import horror movies in Germany and how hard it was and everything about his life. It was very cool and very inspiring. And I wrote a very short biography for him because my idea was like each director will have one page. So I wrote a short biography and I sent it to him. He was like, oh, this is amazing. It's so cool to see my life written out and in English. To him, it was very special because it meant like people in other countries knew who he was. And the conversation ended and the book never came out because I was a kid. I lost interest in it and it probably was not written that well. And a few months later, Andreas sent me an email and said, I have just received money to make my first movie in English. And I'm shooting on a 16 millimeter film, a Super 16. And we are going to film the movie in Rome, Italy. And I would like you to co-write the screenplay with my wife. And he goes, because I think you are a good writer. And I was probably the only person who spoke English very well that he knew. So I said, oh my God, this is a dream. Yes. And so for most of the year 2000, I was working over email on this screenplay with Andreas's wife. And toward the end of 2000, they said, okay, we are going to start filming the movie. They said, would you like to come over to Hamburg where we live and stay in our house for like a month or two and work on the screenplay with us in person to like finish it and fine tune it? I said, oh my God, this is a dream. Yes. And so they flew me to Hamburg and I lived in Hamburg for like 2 months and it was incredible. And during that time, I got to know Andreas very well. I got to know many of his dear friends in Hamburg. And while I was there, he said, oh, a friend of mine is making a movie, like an hour south on the train. And he said, I will get you a train ticket to go visit him if you want to. And I said, yeah, of course. And so I got a train ticket and I went down, I forget where it was, Rellingen, I think was the name of the town. Yeah, it was a very, very tiny town. And I get off the train and I meet Timo Rose. And he was filming Mutation 2, just some gory mutant movie. And he said, I want you to be in my movie. And I said, okay, sure. I'm not much of an actor, but I like walk around. I play like asshole American. And I like walk around. I'm like, hey, get me a coffee. I'm angry, blah, blah, blah. And then a mutant comes out and kills me. And it was fun and silly. And one of the other actors on that movie was Olaf Ittenbach. He was just playing a character.
The German Godfather.
Yeah, yeah. And I knew Olaf, from Burning Moon and other things in the US. And oh God, what was the other one? It had a fucking wild title.
Burning Moon?
Burning Moon. What's that?
Premutos?
Yes, Premutos. Yeah, the fallen angel. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that was the other one I remembered him from. So I met Olaf. I was like, very cool. And I went back to Hamburg, and then we all flew down to Rome. We made this film, Demonium, which came out like nowhere. I think it had a German release, maybe?
Yeah, but it's heavy edited.
Oh, really? Okay.
All the gore is out.
Oh, really? Well, that's fun. And then I know it came out in the UK, because that is the version I have, and it is on a double disc with full cheese Cat in the Brain. That's the only way you could buy it, was like on this disc. And I was like, okay, I guess I own Cat in the Brain now too. But the problem with Demonium was that it's an English language movie directed by a German, but the entire cast is Italian. And they had no idea how to speak English. And so my job on set was to like teach them their lines phonetically. So they did not even know what they were saying sometimes. And so I had worked on this screenplay for a year and a half. And there would be a line like, don't go in there. And I was like, don't go in there. Don't go in there. And then the actor would come over and go, don't go in there. And I was like, no, like, don't go in there. He's like, yeah, see. And we go on set, and you watch the movie now, and you have characters who go, don't go in there. You go, oh. So it is a very difficult movie to watch. I always believe it would be such a better movie if it was dubbed into proper English. Maybe if you saw it dubbed in German, maybe it's a better movie. But I guess you don't get the gore, so yeah.
Where's the fun?
Where is the fun? So I worked on this film. I went back to America and went back to college and got a job in a video store, met my wife. Life went on. And 2 years later, in 2003, I get an email from Andreas Schnaas. He says, I'm making another movie. Do you want to write it? I thought, okay, sure. And so I wrote Nikos the Impaler, Andreas's only shot in America movie. Just terribly silly movie.
I love
just a gore movie. Yeah, me too. I love it too. It's so silly and dumb. It's like a trauma movie. Yeah. You know, it's just a silly fucking movie. It's got like 74 kills in it. It's a slasher movie with 74 kills. Yeah. So I wrote this thing, and it's silly and fun. And 2 years after that, Andreas calls me up again. He goes, I have more money. I'm going to make another movie. Would you like to write it? I said, sure. So I wrote another movie for him called Don't Wake the Dead, about a bunch of girls who go to a haunted mansion and get attacked by Templar night zombies and Nazi zombies who all wake up at the same time and try to eat schoolgirls who are there for a rock concert. It's very silly, but all of Andreas's movies are silly. But it was fun, and I was so proud of this. And then I think, like, oh, this is cool. I made 3 movies with Andreas, and all of a sudden I get a phone call from Timo Rose, who says, do you remember me? I said, of course I remember you. He says, I'm making a movie, and I'm wondering if you would like to write it. And I said, okay. And he said, okay, I also am looking for money. I said, oh, okay. I said, well, I have very little money. But I said, I would love to help produce one of your movies, because a lot of these movies are made for so little, like $6,000, $5,000, like really nothing. Like we say low budget movie, there's like no budget movies, it's and so I took like a very little amount of money that I had, and I partnered up with my very good friend Joe Zazzo, who's an American actor. He is the lead in Nikos. And he's also in Demonium. He was the one American actor who was in Demonium. And I told him, I said, I'm making this movie with filmmaker Timo Rose. And, do you have any money? Would you like to be in it? And he said, oh, yeah, I would love that. And so Joe put in some money. And so Joe and I produced a Gore movie for Timo Rose called Barricade. Which is just a crazy splatter movie that was shot, I think, maybe around here. And it has a few German actors in it. And it did very well. It was actually quite successful. In America, it did very well, too, on DVD. And a year later, Timo said, that was successful. Let's make another one. And I made another one. And then I made another one. And then I thought, I've made 6 movies in like this German underground scene. And by then I was talking to Olaf Ittenbach, I was talking to Jörg Budreich, I was talking to all of these like amazing filmmakers. And I realized like I was accepted into this community. And it was very special to me because it brought me back to my childhood and being in that video store and like taking this copy of Violent Shit off the shelf. And when I took it home and watched it, I thought, this is silly, like camcorder garbage with like spaghetti and linguine. And now, like this was 15 years later, 20 years later, I was like, that movie is fucking magic. Like Violent Shit is fucking magic cinema, because I did not know the history of German horror and how after World War II, the country was basically like, no horror, like no violence. We are trying to like change our image. We cannot have this in the country. But you cannot stop us from loving horror movies. They're special. They're important. And I think it's so fucking amazing and punk rock that these filmmakers like Olaf and Jörg and Timo and Andreas, they could not get these movies. They could not get Dawn of the Dead. They could not get Maniac. They could not get Child's Play. So like, fuck it. Let's make our own movies. Like if they will not let us import horror, we will make it here with like no money because this is what we want to see. And no other country did that. And I think that is so fucking cool. And I have so much respect for it now. And it's why to this day, all these movies, Demonium and Nikos, they're silly, they're no budget and all this. But now I look at them and I'm so proud to have like been a part of this underground scene here and to like help horror reach horror fans in a place where it was hard to watch this stuff. And I think that's the fucking best. So I will always love like German underground horror stuff because it's where I started. And it really is like, it's my fucking heart, I love it. It's the best. My dream, honestly, is I'm a feature filmmaker. I'm not a documentarian. But my dream is I would love, if I was ever to make a documentary ever, I would love to make it about that.
Yeah.
I would love to make it about not just like, oh, here's Timo. Oh, here's Jörg. Oh, here's Olaf. But like start it with like the 1920s, like German expressionist horror, because that shit was extreme. I mean, now we watch it and it's like silly, but like you watch Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, that thing is fucking insane. And the angles and the fucking faces, and it's I can only imagine seeing that in the cinema back then. It must have been like a psychedelic nightmare to watch this. And so like for Germany to have this like amazing history with like horror and suspense cinema, because you also had all those amazing suspense films like M and like these like cool like early movies that inspired Hitchcock, And then it's like it's like you get the rise of your government, you know, in the 30s and the 40s, and all of the sudden the country changes so drastically. And after the war, suddenly it's this like, no, 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 no. But I think what the government does not understand, that we all understand, is like horror does not turn you into a crazy person. Like for a lot of people like me, horror is like therapeutic, you know? And it's like, I feel honestly like what Germany went through during World War II and its recovery after that, horror cinema would have been very therapeutic for people. Because like, I think in America after 9/11, like, which was like one of the most horrible things for America to witness, to see these towers fall and to see thousands of Americans die in this horrible way. We as Americans were like, nothing is fucking scary anymore. Like, that's the most horrible thing I can imagine. Nothing fucking scares me. And so American filmmakers were like, well, then what do we do? What is horror after this? And what came out of it? Torture porn. Like, it is the direct response to 9/11. Torture porn is the direct response to 9/11. And we got Saw, and we got Hostel, and we got these movies that were so fucking brutal and nasty because regular horror just wasn't scary after seeing that. And in a way, like those movies, they are therapeutic because you watch Hostel and you watch Saw, and when it's over, you're like, thank God that was not me. Like, I am safe. I am at home. I am in the cinema. I'm with my loved ones. I'm with my friends. I'm okay. I'm okay. And it reminds you that you are okay. And I think Germany, after the war, needed to be reminded that it was okay. And one of those ways is fucking horror movies. Like, they remind us. And I think that by banning them and by getting rid of them, I think it did such a disservice to people, you know? And that's, I think, the story to tell. Like, I think that's the fucking story. And that all of these filmmakers, these movies, fucking Violent Shit and Premutos and Necromantic, those movies are fucking therapeutic. They actually are. Like, they shock you and they're crazy, but like they help your brain heal too. And I think that's the fucking best. I love it.